Welcome to the stages of readiness for change. This is still part of Unit 1. This is Group 8 out of the Quickstart Guide for Recovery from Addiction and Co-Occurring Disorders by Dr. Dawn-Elise Snipes. Readiness for change is a combination of motivation, willingness, and ability. Most of us go through a sequence of stages as we begin to think about, prepare for, and then take steps to making a behavior change. First, you have to know there's a problem. Then you have to figure out how you might want to solve it. Then you have to make the decision that, okay, I'm actually going to do something. I know what I need to do. I'm actually going to do it. That's what we're talking about with the stages of readiness for change. We also need to recognize, and I mentioned this in the motivation videos, that we have different levels of motivation and readiness for change for every single behavior out there. And some things on your treatment plan you may be really excited to get involved with, and others you may be looking at going, oh yeah, no, not really wanting to do that. That's okay. As long as you understand where your readiness for change is and where your motivation is, you can learn how to enhance your motivation so you can get motivated and get going. I use the example a lot of times of spring cleaning because recovery in many ways is kind of like spring cleaning for our souls, if you want to think about it that way. But when I get ready to do spring cleaning, I'm looking around at my house and I'm going, wow, there's a lot of dust bunnies and there's a lot of stuff shoved in closets. Same thing for our psyche when we're getting ready to go into therapy. However, if I think about it as in a whole, I'm going to get overwhelmed. And there are certain parts of it I'm really not looking forward to doing. But there are other things that I can get a little bit more motivated for. You know what the cool thing is? With spring cleaning in the house or spring cleaning of our soul, no matter where you start, eventually you're going to get to everything. In this video, we're going to talk about something called pre-contemplators, and this is the first stage of readiness for change. This is when you don't recognize or realize there's a problem. A lot of times I make the analogy of this is like being out on the pool deck, getting some sun, getting some rays. It's hot out there. You're not starting to sweat yet. You don't even think there's really a problem. You're just like, it's a beautiful day. I don't know what everybody's fussing about. You don't intend to get into that cold pool. You don't intend to change. Minimization, rationalization, and denial are keys at this point. In pre-contemplation, you don't want to make a change. You either don't see a problem or you're overwhelmed by the prospects. The first type of pre-contemplator is called a rebellious pre-contemplator. And these people are often afraid of losing control, and they often feel forced to make a change, or they're afraid to go see a therapist because they're afraid the therapist is going to force them to make a change. And it's overwhelming to them. They don't want to be told what to do in recovery or most other aspects of their life. It's important to be sensitive to this and ask yourself, what is this behavior saying? If someone is pushing back and saying, don't tell me what to do, and trying to hold on to control as tightly as possible, what is that telling you? What it tells me is there's a good chance that there were times in the past that this person didn't have control, and they're afraid that if they let go of the reins a little bit, they will completely lose control. Either way, it's terrifying to them. In this phase, if you're in that stage where you don't want somebody to tell you what you have to do, all right, so take a breath and figure out how you can shift your energy into making positive changes. What can you do? What are you in control over? What positive changes can you make in order to start, improving your situation, whatever it is? Spend some time thinking about what's making you feel or who's making you feel forced into recovery. That may be an easy answer or it may be a harder answer. But if it is someone that is saying you really need to go do this, think about what is making them think that you have a problem. What are they seeing? What are you afraid will happen if you're not in total control? of everything all the time. And, here's a little hint. You're not in control of everything all the time. So this is just recognizing that. But what are you afraid is going to happen if you start making changes, if you start down a recovery path? What are your fears? Put them out there. And then you can start, once you get them out there, then you can start dealing with them and saying, okay, I'm afraid of this. So what can I do to handle it? How can I maintain control? Think about ways that you can keep yourself safe emotionally and physically. If you're afraid you're going to lose control, if you're afraid you are going to be abandoned, whatever you're afraid of, you want to think about what your fears are about recovery, because safety means addressing those fears. This may be something you've got to talk about with your sponsor or your counselor, and that's cool. That's what they're there for. But it is important in this process, in order to help you get motivated. Most of us are not motivated to do things if we're afraid. So in order to get motivated, you need to feel safe. You need to feel unafraid, or at least feel like you can handle whatever level of anxiety comes up. Identify the things that you do have control over in this process, because you actually do have control over a fair amount of things. When you go to see a counselor, for example, if you came to see me, I can't make you do padiddly squat. I can't make you come. I can't make you talk. I can't make you do assignments. I can ask you to, but I can only ask. You are the one that has to do them. I can't, or ethically, I can't make you do anything. I'm not going to stand over you and torture you into doing something. That's just not how it works. We will provide suggestions. We will ask for things. And if you are working with a clinician, I'll put this little thing out there, that is making you feel forced into something, it's important to maintain your boundaries and assert why that may not feel comfortable. I had a client that came in one time that sat down, and I introduced myself, and before I said anything else, she said to me, "I'm not going to those meetings." And I hadn't said anything about meetings. I just said my name. And I thought about it for a second, and I said, "Okay." And she repeated it again. She says, "I am not going to those meetings." And I said, "Okay." In my mind, it's more important what you are going to do than what you are not going to do. So we can talk about why you don't want to go to those meetings later, but let's talk right now. Let's spend a couple minutes talking about what you are going to do instead. And my job is to help her identify alternatives. My job was to help her feel less scared. She felt very threatened by going to, quote, those meetings. And if she kept up that anxiety, she was not going to stay in treatment. That's just the way it was. It's important, again, to make sure people feel safe and feel like they've got a certain amount of control. Even if she enrolled in the program, I couldn't make her go to those meetings because she is an adult human being. She had the choice whether to go or not. And it's important to empower people to recognize what they have control over. Now, if you're involved in the criminal justice system, for example, and the judge says you've got to do 90 meetings in 90 days, well, then your counselor may not have any say in that. But your counselor can help you figure out how to feel safe in those meetings when you go to them, because not all meetings are alike. Some are really good, some are really bad. And finding one that is a good fit for you, or at least one where you feel comfortable, is what's going to be most important. In her particular case, she was not court ordered, so I knew that I didn't have to break the news to her that the court said she had to. But recognizing what you do have control over, even if you have to do something you don't like go to meetings. What do you have control over? You have control over how much you share. You have control over how many meetings you go to. If you have to do 90 meetings in 90 days, that's one meeting a day. You don't have to go to 3 meetings every day. You have control over which meetings you go to. You may find that there are some that you feel more comfortable in. Recognizing, again, what you have control over will help you feel less pressured and less forced into recovery and less like you're being pushed through the process. And finally, if you're being told that you have to go through this by the courts or a significant other or something else, if you feel forced into treatment, creating safety is going to be important, as well as identifying ways to make the best out of this situation. I had one client who came to me, and he was determined that, number one, substances were not his problem. He was very clear that he was a dealer, not a user. And whether he was or wasn't was irrelevant to me. What was important to me was to help him gain the skills and tools he needed if he wanted to make a change in his life. And what was important to me was helping him stay out of jail and not violate his probation. Part of the stipulation of his probation was that he had to stay clean and sober and he had to come to counseling. So, okay, I want him to stay out of jail. He wants to stay out of jail because he's there. So how can we make the best out of this situation? And, like I said, he was very clear that he didn't have a problem with substances. So me telling him that he couldn't use substances and lecturing him on pharmacology and all that, that was going to put him to sleep. It was important for us to come to some mutually agreeable goals about, okay, what can we accomplish? What other things may have contributed to you, getting in trouble with the law, and how might I be able to help you? Or what kinds of problems are you experiencing because you got involved with the law, and how can I help you? Making it something that's mutually agreeable, because as people are happier and healthier, they are going to be less triggered to use substances. The second type of pre-contemplator is a reluctant pre-contemplator. This person often doesn't have enough knowledge about the problem, the impact the problem's having, or solutions that are available to help them solve the problem. So if you're not sure whether you've got a problem, going through the motivational enhancement activities probably started pointing out that there might be a problem, but really sitting down and listing all the ways that your addiction or your depression or your anxiety or all of the above are impacting your health, your mood, your attitude, your thinking style, your environment, and your relationships. Thinking about all the ways that it's impacting those things is going to help you start identifying whether there really is a problem or not. The third type of pre-contemplator is the resigned pre-contemplator. And this person has experienced recovery before, has tried to recover before, and may have relapsed. Or maybe they haven't tried to recover before, but they are so depressed and so exhausted and so sick and tired that they just can't even fathom having the energy to do all the work that is required for recovery. It's just overwhelming to them. I can understand that. I get that. If this sounds more like you, then it's going to be important to identify all of the times that you have tried to change and been successful in the past. What have you done? Because if you've tried and you were successful, even if it was just for an hour or 4 hours, what were you doing differently? And this will help you identify what we call exceptions, which will help you identify things that you can do in order to keep yourself safe, in order to avoid triggering cravings, in order to avoid triggering your anxiety or depression.